Hello, everybody. Today we are talking to Michael Thorning of the Bipartisan Policy Center, and he's joining us for another ASP Answer segment to talk about certifying the elections. Michael is the Director of Structural Democracy at the Bipartisan Policy Center, where he's worked for more than 10 years. Michael, thank you so much. This is a very important conversation, obviously, and very timely. Good to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Congress is going to meet January 6, 2025 to count and certify the Electoral College vote. Why is their involvement even necessary?
Well, really, it comes down to two things. The first one is that the Constitution requires it. The Constitution imagines a process where all of the state results are transmitted to Washington, and that ultimately it's Congress that counts the results and announces the winner. But that's also provided for in federal law under something called the Electoral Count Act, which really guides the process through which Congress carries out this duty.
I think uniquely enough, whether Kamala Harris wins the presidency, she will be required to participate in the congressional certification process as our sitting vice president. Can you please explain what exactly the vice president's role is in that certification?
Sure. The vice president's job, according to the 12th Amendment, is to preside over a joint session of Congress where the electoral votes from each state are open and read and counted, and if there is a majority winner, where the winner is declared. And so the vice president's role in the Constitution is pretty clear that they are there to preside over that, but it is their role as president of the Senate rather than being a member of the executive branch, but really their duties as a member of the legislative branch. This is also clarified further in federal law that the vice president's duties here really are ministerial in nature. The vice president doesn't have any unilateral authority to make decisions about whether to accept or disregard or otherwise treat the results from the states. The vice president really is there just to oversee and to direct this process and not really to have any decision-making power.
After the 2020 election, more than 140 lawmakers objected to at least one state's election results. Can you tell me what are the legitimate and illegitimate reasons that someone would object to the election results of their state? And are there any mechanisms in place to prevent lawmakers from objecting for illegitimate reasons at all?
This has been something of a long time debate in our politics about what the legitimate role of Congress is, something that actually, goes back to the founding era. But, what we decided as a country around 1887 was that it's not Congress's job to do what's called looking beyond the returns. It's not Congress's job to look into the processes that each state used to get to their electors. Congress's job is to look at whether the electors were appointed properly, whether the electors reflect the process that the state provides for, and whether the electors acted lawfully in carrying out their duty to cast their votes. The states really are given a lot of leeway. It's not Congress's job to look at a particular state and decide that they don't like the state laws by which voting was conducted, that they don't like the behavior of certain state officials or judicial decisions. Really, Congress's job is to look at the end of this process and to make sure that the electors were properly certified, that the people who won the election were certified, that the votes were cast properly, and that the votes they received reflect the votes that were cast.
Did the allegations of election and voter fraud in 2020 prompt any legal or policy changes regarding how Congress certifies the elections?
Significant changes were made after 2020, actually. There was about a 2-year process of examining this 1887 statute called the Electoral Count Act. And ultimately in 2022, Congress agreed to reform it. And they did that in 3 major ways. One was to re-emphasize that the vice president's role is strictly ministerial, that they don't have any unilateral authority that they can exercise that day over the counting or declining to count a state's votes. The second one was to clarify the objections. What are the permissible and impermissible objections? And really what those now amount to, one, an objection can be heard if there's reason to believe that the electors that have been received by Congress, their votes, are not the certified legitimate electors. The other one is that those votes were not lawfully given. And that probably sounds a little bit vague. It is, but there is legal meaning behind that. And really what that has to do with is whether the electors, when they cast their Electoral College votes, did they do so in a way that was legal? That means, did they do it on the proper day defined in law, at the proper place? Were they transmitted properly? And did they cast that vote under any kind of duress or bribery? In those instances, there would be a permissible objection to say that those votes shouldn't be counted. But other than that, the law now is very clear that other objections are not viable once this matter has reached Congress.